And we're back with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Inside Sports Fantasy Football, Game Source, Pop Culture Cosmos, and of course, the Lakers Fast Break. We truly appreciate everyone out there catching all of our great shows, and if you can, please give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, if you could like, share, subscribe, follow, or plus, if you can do anything that you can to support us right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football, Game Source, Lakers Fast Break, and of course, everyone out here at the Pop Culture Cosmos, we truly appreciate it. Plus, also as well, if you can like, share, subscribe, follow, or do anything that you can to support the great folks at Dom-Ination Sports Nation. Catch the sports world like no one else from Dom-Ination Sports Nation, where everywhere you get your podcasts. If you can do all that, plus, also, if you have any questions for us, trades, waiver wire pickups, questions, trades, lineup changes, whole 9 yards about fantasy football, please go ahead and hit us up, isfantasyfootball at yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Well, another great week is in the books, and I will say it was a pretty good matchup between the first and second place team and my neck of the woods with Chris watching it all, and he got to see a barn burner with me pulling it out. So I am actually in front of my league, so I'm very happy about that. But right behind me, tied with the same record, good man indeed. You got to go ahead and catch what he's doing today, right there for you at the Dom-Ination Sports Nation, along with his awesome son. It is Chris Lardieri, and Chris, besides the fact that we need to pat ourselves on the back for being tied for first place in our league, we also need to acknowledge the number of injuries that are out there. They're starting to pile up. It's starting to get serious. And everyone, and I mean everyone, myself included, is now affected by what's going on with the injuries in the NFL.
Gerald, great to be back. Thanks for the nice intro and for having me. Completely agree. If you don't have a player on your team who's injured, then you must have a phenomenal team because I feel like even late in the week, we're getting reports of injuries. It was Kyle Pitts last week, and then the mysterious Russell Wilson went to LA for some sort of a procedure on his injured shoulder that no one knew about. So, despite all that, like you said, first place in our league on the tiebreaker, which is points. We're in second, as we alluded to last week. It panned out that way, so let's hope our predictions continue to come true.
I hope so, my friend, but I am concerned because Rashard Penny, who had such an outstanding week in week 4, unfortunately suffered an injury and he is out for the entire season. There's so many other individuals out there. Quarterbacks, some teams right now are on their third quarterback of the season. Miami with Teddy Bridgewater getting injured. I know New England now has an issue as well. Dallas, I know that as far as Dak Prescott is trying to come back into the lineup, is testing that thumb, but for now, Cooper Rush is still the guy that's right there. I know that there's issues in Carolina, where they just fired their coach. I do know that the fact that they are having issues with Baker Mayfield having injuries himself. Cleveland, I believe there's also some injuries as well. So tell me what's going on. What can people do about it? And my gosh, there's so many injuries out there. We talk about not hitting the panic button. Is it time to hit the panic button?
I think so. I think you've got to go and pick up a quarterback out there that you would normally maybe thumb your nose at. And we did that very thing in one league, picking up Geno Smith with Russell Wilson. It looks like he's going to play on Monday night, but hurt or not, he hasn't been putting up numbers. So Geno Smith had another nice game against the Saints. Put all your past notions of him behind. The guy's going to get points as long as he's throwing to DK Metcalf, like you alluded to. With Penny out, it looks like Kenneth Walker is going to get the majority of the carries. So that's just one example. I know we've mentioned Jared Goff in previous shows. They threw up a goose egg against the Pats on Sunday, and they're on a bye week, so you may have to look a little deeper. My team, the New York Giants, Daniel Jones isn't putting up huge numbers, but he does run a lot, and he's apt to get a running touchdown if you're, having bye week issues too and an injury. Maybe that's someone you look at. And, we've got Kirk Cousins on our bench in one league, and I feel fortunate. So, this is a wacky year.
Absolutely. So I'm very concerned what's going on. The Detroit Lions receivers, very iffy on when they're come back for the lineup. So really just a lot of issues right now for the league. Can you tell me more about how to go ahead and navigate this through? I usually go look first for trades to find quality individuals, but if I see nobody taking or trying to at least go ahead and deal with me fair and square, I know there's not much left right now by the time when it gets to NFL Week 6 when it concerns what's going on with the waiver wire, but maybe there's some diamonds in the rough, but you have to look pretty darn hard.
Especially at the QB position. But if the trade angle doesn't work out, because let's face it, some of the good teams see what's going on with this rash of injuries and the bye weeks looming, and they may want to keep their bench deep and also play addition by subtraction. Don't put someone good out there for your opponent who may be breathing down your neck. So you're going to have to play the waiver week to week, looking at matchups. As I mentioned earlier with Geno Smith, he's got a favorable matchup against a pretty porous Cardinals defense, although they played pretty well against the undefeated Eagles this past weekend. But literally, all you can do is go week by week, look at the projections, and honestly use your eyeball test, which I like to do. I mean, there's so much opinion out there, so many ways the stats are sliced, diced, and analyzed. I mean, look at the games, look at the highlights, whether it's on the internet or any of these plethora of wrap up shows, and see who you think impresses you. Someone who may be on a bench this week or a spot starter or even just a role player, maybe a starter in the coming weeks if the injuries keep coming.
One of the things that people now have to consider, on top of all the injuries, is the fact that bye weeks start this week. So now you might have 3, 4 players in your lineup that are out because of the buys. What do you do then? You've got injuries piling up on one side, you've got buys on the other. Now you take the risk of possibly having to leave decent players on the waiver wire.
Yeah, this is where if you drafted properly or you've done waivers properly in weeks 1 through 5, which is where your bench guys need to get the start and compare them to what's out there. If their projections or your opinion on how they'll perform, if that's better than what's on the waiver wire, start them. I mean, what you have to realize is the huge scoring numbers we've seen in a number of teams and our leagues, for instance. That's not going to continue. Maybe you win a game with a sub 100 score, for instance, in a standard half point PPR league. There's nothing wrong with that. Just keep winning, just keep putting up as many points as possible and know you're not the only one. But if you've got these bench players, they're there for a reason, and I would start them. I mean, even at running back, someone like we've got Alexander Madison on our team from the Vikings. Maybe if you have to throw him in a flex, do it. If the alternative is someone who's really not a starter or has got an unfavorable matchup, like for instance, the Falcons are going up against the 49ers D. That may be tough sailing for some of their offensive players.
And there's still some issues in regards to some position battles that are still taking place even this deep in the season. The one place I need you to look the most, especially in a position that is really, really in trouble right now, is running back position. Chicago, the Bears. The Bears, I can tell firsthand, are having issues as far as who they need to start, who they should start between Montgomery and Herbert. Your thoughts on this? Herbert's the one with the better yards per carry. Herbert's the one that seems to be, when given the opportunity, seems to produce better. But for some reason, they like going back to Montgomery. And even after a performance where somehow you managed to get 16 points out of him, even though he only got 20 yards, I just don't I just don't understand exactly what the rationale is and why they can't go to Herbert a lot more often.
I don't get it either, and it just seems like they've got this mentality that even though Montgomery got hurt, it's still his job when he gets back. But I think I agree with you. I think Herbert's got more upside. He passes the eye test, more value long term. And look, Montgomery's already been banged up this year. Odds are it might continue to hamper him the rest of the year. So in that case, if you're a Herbert owner, I would stay put and be patient. And then too, who knows? It might even turn into one of these rotation type systems where they're both getting carries and you just roll the dice and hope Herbert gets the touch that gets you into the red zone and inevitably a touchdown.
Another place of concern, I think, for a lot of people right now that are playing out there is the injury in Seattle to Rashard Penny, who, like I said earlier, really had a lot of promise going on. Who is picking up the slack in Seattle, and the fact that he was, at least in our league, no longer available on the waiver wire. He's still available in most waiver wires. Tell us exactly who might be filling in and getting most of the pickups for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, judging by what I've read in the waiver wire trends this past week, it looks like it's going to be Kenneth Walker. And for whatever reason, the Seahawks seem to be able to move the ball on the ground. I was high on Penny coming into this year. He had a few nice games until unfortunately he got injured. So if you are a Penny owner, that should be your priority for the week. Otherwise, like we said, slim pickings with running back. So I guess you've got to put all your proverbial eggs in one basket there. But that's the name right now. But keep your eye on that because we've seen even last year in Seattle when they weren't a playoff team, Pete Carroll tends to rotate his running back. So who knows? There might be some sort of deep sleeper on the bench that might emerge. Not quite sure, but Walker for the immediate near term future is your answer.
Walker did have a 70 plus yard touchdown in last week's game, or 70 plus yard run, I should say. And then also the fact that I tried to get him in our league. Unfortunately, I'm not high enough on the waiver list, so somebody snatched him up before I did. But I will say it is someone out there that if you do have Rashard Penny, he's gone for the season, so you need to make amends right away.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. We also put in that same claim for Walker and were unsuccessful.
I know. Imagine how that is. That several teams in the league, just that one individual when it pops up when need be. So that tells you the injuries are starting to pile up. The bye weeks are starting to kick in. Know who is on the bye weeks for this week, and also the weeks going forward. Be aware of that because if you don't pay attention to it, that can mean some lost points that you could go ahead and put anybody in there that could have gotten you anything. So, your thoughts on this, on how to keep track on the buys? Because, again, for a lot of people, a lot of beginners and also people that, I guess, casual players per se, they always have a tendency to miss at least one or two buys each and every season.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the apps make it easy now. You'll get these alerts that someone's on by even when you go into the app at the top. If that's not the case, go through your lineup this week and scroll through, and you'll look at the projected points. And if there's a big fat zero, odds are you look over to the left and you'll see his week 6 opponent is by, which means he's off. Uh, by the same token, I would scroll forward to next week or even a week after that just to eyeball to see who else is on by if you need to make any contingency plans on waivers heading into those weeks or move your bench slots around into starters. It's never too early to start thinking about these.
Especially if you've got kicker or defense concerns, because that's really when it comes down to a lot of people streaming. So you have to be ahead of the ball game and try to go ahead first and get those kickers or defensive teams that actually have some good matchups coming up. Because again, if they're out in the waiver wire list, you got to go ahead and make sure you pick one of those up ahead of time. Because if you get stuck with a lousy kicker or a team, it could be even a good kicker with a good leg, but if he doesn't get a chance to go ahead and kick some field goals and just kicks extra points, really doesn't do you that much good.
Definitely, you don't want to be stuck with picking up the plethora of kickers out there that have been on multiple teams. Guy on the Cardinals, his name escapes my memory because he's so forgettable, but been on his third team this year, and you see why when he shanked that would-be tying field goal against the Eagles this past Sunday.
And
So,
we're not even up to week 6.
yep. So make sure you get yourself a name kicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Something of a big priority to everyone out there. But yes, when it's on the waiver wire, if you've got issues with buys, you got to understand if you give up some valuable players or a valuable defense or a valuable kicker, know that people are willing to go ahead and steal them out from under you, even on the bye week. I mean, seriously, if there's a good player out there, there are some people scouting the waiver wires that say, you know what? If people leave them out there, I'm going to go ahead and snatch them up.
Absolutely. And one other thing to take into account, I mentioned earlier with Pitts being out last week, if your league has an IR slot or two, by all means utilize it for your players that are hurt. So we shifted Pitts over there. We didn't need to drop a player that we normally would have to, and we picked up a free agent. Almost creates this extra slot on your roster, even though it doesn't. But and then the next week, if Pitts is back, put him back in your lineup, release that player, and the charade continues. So by all means, we've been playing this game long enough. That wasn't always a luxury. We had the IR slot.
But still, don't put someone out there that's going to be out for the season or have a really extensive time as far as being out of the lineup. Then it serves you no good. But yes, you're right. I know exactly what you're talking about. That's a good
Yeah.
point.
I would say someone like a Dak Prescott, you're almost forced to keep him in that IR spot. You
Yeah,
know he's coming back. You just don't know how long.
absolutely. But like Rashard Penny,
Yeah.
unless he's in a keeper league. If you're in a keeper league, then obviously you want to go ahead and try and keep him. But if he's not, you're in a league just like ours, a casual league where just go ahead week by week. Go ahead, let him go. Don't touch him on. Don't put him on IR. Don't. That wouldn't be. It would just be wasting a slot, like you said.
Yep.
That Chris has a perfect way of utilizing the IR. So
Yeah. Completely agree. Once you hear that guy's done for the year, release him. Pick up a new player.
you got it, indeed. But once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford, along with Chris Lardieri, the man, along with his great son, Mr. Dominic Lardieri. The guys behind Dom-Ination Sports Nation. You got to go ahead and catch it wherever you get your podcasts. So before we head on out, my friends, some great matchups in NFL Week 6. Again, bye weeks are starting, so not as many games, not as many opportunities to gain points. But who do you have as far as some picks? Not per se as far as underdogs. The woof 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 doghouse coming up. But what are your thoughts on NFL Week 6 as far as some standouts are concerned?
Yeah, we've been on a nice little roll. We told you we liked Austin Eckler and Pierce from the Texans the last few weeks. They've continued to
Mm-hmm.
roll on and put up nice points. Due to a bye week issue, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown. We picked up Rondell Moore of the Cardinals. He seems to be emerging as a favorite target of Kyler Murray. Normally, would you start him? No, but if you need a third wide receiver or some flex points, I think he's worth a start. And then two, it looks like Juju Smith-Schuster in Kansas City is getting more and more targets. He got close to the end zone a couple of times, but no pay dirt on Monday night against the Raiders. But I see Mahomes targeting him more and more, and I think he's due to put up some more points. Albeit the matchup's tough this week, the rematch of that great AFC playoff game against the Bills again in Kansas City. But as we saw, teams can move the ball on the Bills defense, and the Chiefs are no exception.
Well, it's just amazing to see what's going on with the Raiders because here in Las Vegas, it's become very. I guess the tension is mounting per se because of obviously the ineptness of what's gone with the Raiders. They 1 week their defense does okay and they still lose. 1 week the offense does okay and they still lose. It's just they're finding every way to lose each and every week. But hey, you know what? It's the Raiders and they rip. They've traded everything in for Devontae Adams and you're seeing the fruits of that right now.
Absolutely. As we've said, you get these big name players, they get a big chunk of the cap money, and you can't build depth on, whether it's the offensive line, the defensive side of the ball, it takes effect. And then, too, Josh McDaniels, they already love second guessing him in Vegas, as I'm sure you know, going for it on two late in the game, some of his play calling, and then, even off the field, Adams shoving the photographer after the game. It's become a big mess with the Raiders. But yeah, I've gotta agree with you. You put that much money in a quarterback and a wide receiver, it has a trickle down effect on your roster.
Absolutely. So for NFL Week 6 this weekend, I think the game that stands out to me is actually coming up on Thursday with the Bears hosting the Commanders. I think that the Commanders are almost as big of a mess as the Raiders right now. I think the Commanders are, and them and the Panthers. I don't know. The Panthers, Commanders, or the Raiders. You pick as far as the one team that's actually the biggest mess right now. I just think going in on the road against the Bears have a probably one of the best rushing attacks that are out there in the NFL. If they could just keep it on the ground, they've got this game won.
You would think, but all I ask is it's not a repeat of last week's debacle between the Broncos and the Colts with no touchdowns. And good if you had the fantasy kickers. Um, I'd have to say the biggest mess is the Panthers. They've already fired Matt Rule after 2+ seasons. Now there's rumors Christian McCaffrey might be on the trade market. Baker Mayfield's hurt. They've got PJ Walker as their starting quarterback. I think at this point, this is your leader in the clubhouse of the team that's going to tank for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud next year. But I will say the Commanders aren't far behind them. Ron Rivera throwing Carson Wentz under the bus. Why'd you trade for the guy? They look like a hot mess. And, if this is a week for the Bears to pick someone off for a victory, I would think this would be it. But, I think that's going to require Justin Fields to run the ball because teams know the Bears are a run first team.
Absolutely. And then the Panthers are going into the Rams, who have really not had much to say about their home cooking this year. They have been, in my opinion, the biggest disappointment of the NFL season. But my gosh, if there's any game they're going to win, it's got to be this weekend against the Panthers.
Absolutely a must win, and I think the timing is right to face the Panthers, to say the least.
But there's two big time matchups before we head on out. Woof, woof, we head on out to the doghouse. The Bills and the Chiefs. The Bills on the road again, facing another big team in the NFL. I think this is probably if they, for a team that was picked by many to win the Super Bowl, this is one of their many obstacles. They're at least you can say they're going to earn their way to a championship if they get that far. Plus, also the Cowboys, the resurging Cowboys against the unbeaten Eagles. I know Philly fans are going wild and crazy over Jalen Hurts. Your thoughts on these two games before we head to the doghouse?
Those are definitely the marquee games. I noticed the Bills being favored in Kansas City surprised some people, but judging by what happened last year in Arrowhead, not a total shock. And then two, looks like Dak's not going to be back, but I don't think that makes the Cowboys any less viable. I think this is the real first test for that Eagles offense going up against the stout Cowboys D, and Micah Parsons, even injured, put on a show against the Rams. So looking forward to both. I think we're going to see who the clear favorites are in their respective conferences after Sunday night's results. And I don't think it'll be etched in stone, but I would not be entirely shocked if we see both of these matchups again in January in the playoffs.
I wouldn't surprise me either, but some big time matchups early in the season in NFL Week 6. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But before we head on out, we head out onto the porch once again, stretching out, doing a big yawn, looking over the neighborhood. Everything looks good. Heading out, almost getting tripped over my kids' toys, maybe the tricycle out there. But my gosh, feeling my way through the lawn, and woof, 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 I'm heading to the doghouse.
Got back on the winning track last week. The Cowboys won outright. They were getting 5.5 in SoFi. Again, one of the biggest head scratchers of the year, in my opinion. As predicted, it looked like a Cowboys home game in Inglewood. But this week, I think we're gonna switch course a little bit, kind of go off the beaten path here. There are a couple lines that interested me. The Patriots getting 2.5 against the Browns in Cleveland. I'm not thrilled that the Patriots start a third string quarterback, but I'd rather have the 3.5, although that's one that kind of piqued my interest. Would not be surprised if the Patriots win that game outright, the way they're playing, especially on defense. But the one that really interested me, the NFC West matchup between the Cardinals going into Seattle in that loud stadium. The 12s will be out in force. The Seahawks are getting 3 points at home. I love my home dogs. Don't want to be greedy, but I'd love that extra half a point. But despite the injuries you outlined with Rashad Penny, this Seattle offense can put up some points, and we all know the Cardinals' defense is not the most stout. I think the Seahawks could win this game outright. I would not be surprised at all. Geno Smith, one of the great stories of even a comeback story in the NFL this season. There's talk of him being a contender to win the MVP. I still say it's too early to say, but I'd go out on a limb, and I think the Seahawks can win this game. It's tough to play in Seattle. We saw Russell Wilson go back for his not so nice homecoming and how the Seahawks greeted him. So take the 3 points. I think it'll be a close game. At the end of the day, Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray, not a fan of their late game management and clock scenarios, but I think the Seahawks are your pick this week in the doghouse.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. If you have any questions for us, waiver wire pickups, questions on trades, lineup changes, or basically the road ahead to the fantasy football playoffs, you have any questions there as well, please let us know. isfantasyfootball at yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Tell you what, Chris, another great episode in the books. Truly appreciated. Know a lot of things are coming up in NFL Week 6, but any last thoughts before we head on out?
You hit the nail on the head earlier with the bye weeks as they come here, and they're going to last for a while. Just be strategic, look ahead as you can. You really can't control injuries. All you can do is hope for the best on the waiver wire and hope that your bench players perform in the clutch. I think the big thing, and I hit on this earlier, temper your expectations with points. These are the weeks here where you just want to squeak out the wins, keep your hopefully above 500 record, and when the buys do fall off, then you've got all your ideal starters playing, and where the most difficult decision is who to start and who to sit. So this is the time though you need to pay attention, because these middle portions of the season are where it can make or break your season, and you could either start a nice winning streak or start tumbling on a losing streak and miss your playoffs.
RS German says, good evening, fellas. Good evening to you as well. Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. We truly appreciate it. Again, if you have any questions for us on fantasy football, let us know. isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com, or of course, Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Well, Chris Lardieri, great having you here, my friend. NFL Week 6 is on the way. Again, if you're a team out there that hasn't made their lineup changes as of yet, as soon as you hear this, check for your team, your starting lineup, if there's any buys. It is imperative that you understand that the bye weeks start this week. Oh, before we head on out, question for us. Excellent question indeed, RS German. Question for you fine gentlemen. Well, okay, I know Chris is. I guess I qualify as that, but I don't know, maybe. But trade away Hollywood for CD and Najee before we head on out.
Yeah, if you're trading Hollywood Brown, I would do that. I think Lamb has value, especially as It looks like Prescott's going to be back in the next couple weeks. And
Yes.
then, as bad as the Steelers are, at least Najee Harris is a starting NFL running back with some promise. Maybe if Kenny Pickett can get up and running and learn on the fly, that'll be better for his value. But as a throw-in, I think that's pretty nice. Wouldn't you agree, Gerald?
That's absolutely correct. And we now, with all the injuries, which is the theme for this week's episode, now you've got to start looking at, I guess, you got to start looking at building your depth on your roster and having options, because as the injuries start piling up, it is very apparent that you need to start looking at building your team and actually overcoming those injuries. And that's one way to do it, in maneuvering around good waiver wire pickups, and of course a good trade that builds your team, a 1-for-2 that gets you 2 quality players instead of the one you have already.
Completely agree.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Chris, you've been outstanding once again. Truly appreciate it. Everyone out there, again, if you have any questions for us, always hit us up, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Always love to hear your comments, questions, or thoughts on Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Truly appreciate it. Love to hear your thoughts. But again, bye weeks. Bye weeks are here. NFL Week 6. Make sure you check for your team. Make sure you check your starting lineups to make sure you don't have them in place. Go ahead and make the maneuvers. RS German says, thank you so much and have a good night. You have a good night. And thank you so much for watching and listening. Once again, we truly appreciate it. Good luck, NFL Week 6. Make sure you can go ahead and just do what you can to maneuver around those injuries, maneuver around those buys. We have faith in you, and hopefully you will do well this weekend from your friends at Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Oh, hold on. Before we head on out, Randy Miller. All right. We're going to keep on the air just a little longer. Randy Miller says, I'm getting offered Drake London and Kenneth Walker for CEH and McLaren. Your thoughts on that before we head on out?
That's a tough one. I like CEH's value. I have him in a league. But you are getting what appears to be a starter in Walker in return. What do you
Yep.
think, Gerald?
I like it. I like it,
Yeah.
my friend. I'd go for it. Again, you have to start thinking about maneuvering around injuries, being prepared for the bye weeks, and having quality players. More options to you is probably more important to me this time right now in the season.
Yeah, and the thing that worries me is CEH tends to fade late in the season, so that I like that logic there.
All right, indeed. But once again, ASAP. Oh, yes, do that right now. Absolutely. RS German says, yes, do that right now. ASAP. Truly appreciate it. Again, you can always ask us if you have any questions inside Sports Fantasy Football, or leave it in the comments right here on YouTube. I will go ahead and check it. I will notify Chris. We will go ahead and make sure we answer your questions as fast as possible. isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com, Inside Sports FF on Twitter, or in the comments right here at Pop Culture Cosmos. So for Chris Lardieri, it's Gerald Glassford. Truly appreciate you watching and listening. Wishing you good luck this weekend, NFL Week 6. Bye weeks and injuries. Hopefully you can get around them. We wish you the best of luck in that. And we truly appreciate you watching and listening to us right here at Inside Sports Fantasy